The extent to which Bernie Sanders is surging, it is truly remarkable. And as someone who has been advocating for the policies that Bernie Sanders is pushing for years now, I mean, it doesn't feel real. Like, it feels like we're in the Twilight Zone or this is a dream and we're going to wake up. But this is very real. Bernie Sanders may win the Democratic Party nomination. And just to really point out how much he's surged since the last time we talked about polls on this show, first of all, he's closing the gap between him and Joe Biden nationally. He has surged past Joe Biden in Iowa and is now multiple points ahead of him overall, when just last week he was down 4 points in Iowa. And in New Hampshire, he's now 8 points ahead of Joe Biden overall. And we've officially reached the point where mainstream media can't pretend that Bernie Sanders isn't surging. They can't pretend like if they ignore him, he's going to go away. Because Bernie Sanders may very well be unstoppable. And to show you the sense that the mainstream media is getting, I want to play a clip from CNN where Henry Anton, previously from 538, talks about Bernie's numbers. And I think this communicates that they realize something is happening. And if he wins Iowa and New Hampshire, he may be unstoppable.
All right. In terms of the Democratic primary,
yes,
there is more polling, more signs that things are going well for Bernie Sanders.
Things are going very, very well for Bernie Sanders. Look at this. In New Hampshire, the second contest, the first primary. Look at this. Now he's up to 29%, clearly leading the field. That's up 14 points. That is a surge going way, way up there. In Iowa, take a look here. You know, the average of the last CNN poll, the Monmouth U poll, what do we see? Bernie Sanders up 5 points. Pete Buttigieg going down into the basement in Iowa, falling through the cracks. So it's another early state. You win Iowa and you win New Hampshire, that's a very tough train to really stop. And we also see it, we spoke about it yesterday, nationally, from late October in Harry's average, up from 16% in late October up to 21% now. So Iowa, New Hampshire, Iowa, Bernie Sanders up in all of them. And that, my friends, is a sign of a surge. Something is happening in the Democratic primary.
That is the only CNN clip that I think I've ever watched that genuinely made me smile. And it's not because I think that Henry Anton is some Bernie bro who's a fan of Bernie Sanders, but he acknowledges that something really unique and possibly historical is happening right now. And even since that video came out where they acknowledged that Bernie Sanders is surging, even more polls show that he's doing better than that. MSNBC discusses how he's now taken the lead nationally among non-white voters, surpassing Joe Biden. He's now leading in California, according to a new poll. And in one poll from New Hampshire, he is literally the only candidate who reaches that 15% viability threshold to win any pledged delegates. Now, this poll from Emerson found him 9 points ahead of Biden, and he is only one of two candidates to reach double-digit support from voters under 50. And on top of that, he has the most enthusiastic base of support, which is going to matter the most going into these caucus states. Now, it's funny because that Emerson poll came out Sunday evening, and then expectedly, the very next day, we saw a barrage of articles basically attacking Bernie Sanders or describing how the establishment now really, really wants to defeat Bernie Sanders and that they are shaking in their boots officially. For example, from Politico, quote, "They let him get away with murder. Dems tormented over how to stop Bernie." From CNN, Bernie Sanders surge rattles establishment Democrats 1 week from Iowa. From the Daily Beast, worried Democratic operatives scramble to fund a network to take down Bernie Sanders. From The Atlantic, Bernie Can't Win, written by neocon David Frum, who worked for George W. Bush and supported the Iraq War. From the New York Times, Bernie Sanders and his internet army. At the start of his 2020 bid, the Vermont senator told his supporters that he condemned bullying. Is it his problem if many don't seem to listen? So, I mean, they're grasping at straws here, trying to attack Bernie left and right, trying to find old videos to show that Bernie Sanders isn't as consistent as he used to be, and resorting to the old Bernie bro smear because, I mean, they've got nothing else. They're throwing everything to the wall in order to see what sticks, and quite frankly, I am enjoying this, but we haven't even gotten to the ugliest attacks yet, because from the Washington Post, they tweeted out this article, "Perspective. Anti-Semites see socialism as a Jewish plot. What will they say about Bernie Sanders? Now, when you click on the article, it talks about how Bernie Sanders may soon have to confront this myth, because the media won't confront it for him. He's going to have to confront it. And from The Economist, the Vermont senator's campaign slogan used to be a future to believe in. Now it's just Bernie. And that's obviously wrong because his slogan is not me, us, but look at this picture. Does that look like they're trying to prime you to think about him in any particular way? I mean, considering the fact that he's Jewish, what does that remind you of? Oh, right, it's the anti-Semitic caricature. So they are going after him guns blazing, and I promise you, if he does emerge victorious in Iowa and New Hampshire, these attacks that we're seeing will quadruple at a minimum. Now, to kind of give you the quick rundown of all of these articles, because we can't possibly read all of them, essentially, most establishment figures like Rahm Emanuel, Matt Bennett from Third Way, they feel as if the media hasn't been vetting Bernie enough, if you could imagine that, when he's been relentlessly smeared from the media, when he is covered and they're not just ignoring him completely. But on top of that, the establishment kind of feels like they're stuck, in this catch-22 where if they don't do anything to stop Bernie Sanders, if they don't attack him, then he could just run away with the nomination. But on the other hand, if they attack Bernie Sanders, they realize that, that's a dangerous game to play because it's going to galvanize his support and we're going to donate, we're going to support him even more, which we will. So they don't know what to do. They're stuck, in this place where if they attack him, they help him, but if they don't attack him, they help him, and they feel hopeless in the situation, hence why they're tormented, which I love. And on top of that, they're concerned trolling about electability as Joe Biden loses his mind on reporters and, people showing up to town hall events. They're trying to bring out every single argument imaginable to make sure that Bernie Sanders is defeated. But here's the thing. It may be too late for them, but here's why whenever Bernie Sanders does well in polls, people like myself, Kyle Kulinski, David Dole caution you to not let your foot off the brakes, right? Because here's the thing. In these types of caucus states, we're getting dangerously close to Bernie Sanders being the only candidate who is viable. And if their candidates, let's say in Iowa, for example, doesn't reach that 15% threshold, let's say Pete Buttigieg doesn't hit 15%, his supporters then have the chance to caucus for Joe Biden, which could give Joe Biden the edge. So this is why when we say the better Bernie Sanders does, the harder we have to fight, because every single thing that we can imagine that will be thrown at us will be thrown at us and more. So we can't just eke out a victory. We have to beat Joe Biden and every other Democrat by a wide margin because we have to change and control the narrative. If Bernie wins Iowa and New Hampshire, imagine what that will do in terms of narrative control, right? Then that will give him momentum going into Nevada. And what I'm expecting is if Bernie Sanders truly does win Iowa and New Hampshire, that's certainly a possibility. The minute anyone but Bernie wins a primary, the media and the Democratic Party establishment will flock to that candidate. This is what we saw back in 2016 with Donald Trump, right? They were grasping onto any candidate but Donald Trump, Marco Rubio, Ted Cruz, John Kasich, but it wouldn't work. But whoever wins the first post-Bernie primary, that candidate will be who the media flocks to. And in the event Bernie becomes the nominee, it's still not over. We have to fight Donald Trump and the establishment because I don't expect them to just accept that Bernie will be the nominee, right? I expect a third-party challenge from Mike Bloomberg or someone else. I expect, a lot of centrist Democrats to just outright pledge support to Donald Trump. And the rationalization will be that, Bernie Sanders will destroy the Democratic Party and socialism will make him lose. They're already fear-mongering about socialism. So you've got to understand that we can't even anticipate all of the attacks that are coming. But what we're seeing now, I don't think it's going to affect him, but it's going to quadruple. And my overall point and what I want you to take away from this video is that as Bernie Sanders surges, we'll respond to these attacks, but overall let them roll off your shoulders. Because the problem is that when you overwhelm people with so many attacks, then they're just going to tune them out, right? It's too much. They're trying everything and they're giving voters not much time to focus on any one attack for Bernie Sanders because they're scrambling and they don't know what to do. Now, here's what I want to leave you with. These were all expected. None of us had the expectation that the Democratic Party establishment would unite behind Bernie Sanders willingly. At most, we have some of them acquiesce, but they're not just going to willingly coalesce around Bernie Sanders. I will truly be floored if a lot of them truly, support Bernie if he's the nominee. But this was all expected. That's what I want you all to realize, and I don't want you to feel too down. This is all what we anticipated, and we kind of built this in to, the woodwork, right? We're anticipating possibly Obama coming out and attacking Bernie Sanders if it truly seems like he's going to run away with the nomination, which is why on Twitter I said find every video of Obama saying nice things about Bernie and have that ready so we can share them like crazy, so that way people know that these are all just politically calculated attacks, and they just don't want Bernie to win because they either are expecting a job in a Biden or Buttigieg administration, or because their financial interests are at stake. They don't want, the health insurance industry to become non-existent because that benefits their bottom line. But this was all to be expected, and the reason why it's happening is because Bernie is the real deal. So I'll leave you with this video where Bernie Sanders explains how the reason why this is happening is because he really is the Democratic Party and the establishment in general's worst nightmare. And it's not Bernie Sanders. It's all of us collectively together realizing the power that we have. That truly is their worst nightmare.
Tell how good I feel by how nervous the establishment is getting. Suddenly, Donald Trump is talking about our campaign. Suddenly, the Republican National Committee is tweeting about our campaign. Suddenly, we have the Democratic establishment very nervous about this campaign. We got Wall Street nervous. We got the insurance companies nervous. We got the drug companies nervous. We got the fossil fuel industry nervous. We got the military-industrial complex nervous. We got the prison-industrial complex nervous. We got billionaires going on television crying that they're going to have to start paying their fair share of taxes. And they're starting to think, could this really happen? Could there really be a political movement in America which brings together blacks and whites and Latinos and Asian Americans and Native Americans, gay and straight, to stand up as working class people fighting for change? We are their worst nightmare.